According to a heartbreaking report from the Center for Human Rights in Iran, the Iranian regime's imprisonment of Christians has exploded sixfold. Well, Dexter Van Zile, managing editor of Focus on Western Islamism, is here with the details. Dexter, what can you tell us about this report?
Okay, well, the report was put out by the Center for Human Rights in Iran on April 1st. And one of the things that they said was is that essentially that the regime is essentially persecuting Christians even more than it did in the previous year. And in 2024, Iran's imprisonment of Christians increased by about 600%, with the authorities handing down a total of 263 years in prison for 96 Christians. That was in 2024. In the previous year, in 2023, they imposed sentences of 43.5 years for 22 individuals who, left Islam and became practicing Christians. That's what it's looking like to me. And what they're saying is that they are charging these people with acting against the national security and essentially which can actually lead to executions. And the arrests in 2024 were carried out by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which is a notorious organization. It's a notorious human rights abuser that's been sanctioned by numerous Western governments. And the thing is that this really isn't a surprise because what we see, and first of all, we know that the evangelical community has basically been has been able to basically establish a fair number of what we would call underground house churches in Iran. And we do know that Christianity is growing in popularity in Iran, largely in part because of it serves as a protest against the oppression of the regime itself. Most of us probably already know about the woman life freedom protests, where essentially the religious police in Tehran and other large cities are essentially harassing and arresting women for not wearing the hijab in public. And there's a tremendous amount of protest against that. And we also hear stories, of people essentially converting to Christianity. These are the stories that I've heard and talked to missionaries and people in the evangelical community who say that basically Jesus visits them in dreams. And as a Christian myself, I'm not going to discount those dreams or that testimony. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, first of all, the regime knows that people are basically responding with contempt to the Islamist oppression that they've been have endured, and what has happened is that essentially that the only people that they can really rely on are people who are tied to the regime or people in the religious community that are essentially that their destinies are tied in with the regime itself. And the thing is that a lot of Westerners might have a tough time understanding that because if they see if you were in London just recently, you would have seen an Al Quds rally that was essentially organized by pro-regime protesters as part of an influence operations campaign in the West. So you're going to think when you look at all of these operations, these protests, that essentially that the regime has a lot of support in Iran when in fact it doesn't. And one of the expressions of opposition to the regime is apparently a growing religious practice in the country.
What do you mean by influence operations?
Well, influence operations is essentially a word used to describe any effort to essentially divide or the public opinion in like an adversary on the world stage. And essentially, Arab and Muslim countries, did this a lot during, they still do it, but they would send, students to colleges and universities throughout the United States to basically promote hostility towards Israel and promote this narrative that Israel was perpetrating a genocide. And Turkey has also, if you look at the pages of the Focus on Western Islamism at the Middle East Forum, you'll see that, for example, President Erdogan from Turkey, he will use the Turkish diaspora to essentially destabilize or cause disruptions in European countries like Sweden and Germany. So this is a time-honored method. And what has happened is that there are people here in the West who will exercise their rights that are from these regimes, who will exercise their rights and freedoms to essentially destabilize, uh, Western democracies and use rights and freedoms that they wouldn't have if they were living back in Iran or Turkey or any other country in the region as well.
This all just seems kind of backwards. You have the flourishing of Christianity juxtaposed with the Iranian regime, which is an authoritarian Islamic republic. And then in the West, that same regime is coercing and manipulating folks to use their own rights against them to promote ideas that are the opposite of those countries' values, which is that's some 3D
Right,
chess right there.
right,
So I guess Dexter,
right. And the
what
interesting thing is that some of the people who are doing this, they are actually tied in with the regime because they are either have officials who are related in the Iranian government or former diplomats who basically engage in, this type of influence operation on colleges here in the United States as well. And the thing is that uh, one of the things is that a lot of the people who engage in this type of behavior are very well tied to the regime. So they aren't doing it because they're afraid. They're doing it largely because it's in their interest, because they're part of the coalition or they're part of the regime itself.
that's really interesting to hear what's happening in the West and also what's happening in Iran. So I guess on this question would factor into both of those things. Maybe lastly, Dexter, what are dissidents telling you about what's actually happening?
One of the interesting things, and they are shocked, is that first of all they will send me pictures, and we posted them on Focus on Western Islamism of people at these anti-Israel, anti-Western Al-Quds rallies, with people carrying around pictures of Ayatollah Khomeini, and they say, "What is going on?" And I have a version of a conversation that I've had with people again and again from people from the Middle East and South Asia. And the conversation goes like this: I left the region to get away from this Islamist oppression. And I didn't want to live under this oppression. And I came to the West, I came to the United States, I came to Canada, I went to Europe to essentially enjoy the rights and freedom that the West gives me. And then all of a sudden, I see all of these activists who are essentially advocating on behalf of a regime that wants to put me back under that system of oppression. And the thing that shocks them the most is that the Westerners that they have taken up with, who they rely on to keep them safe and to basically help protect their rights, are largely indifferent or ignorant to the threats to their civil society that they are so committed to. If you want to know somebody that is committed to protecting Western democracies, talk to a dissident from Iran, and they love it here. And the thing is that the people who work on behalf of the regime, they enjoy the rights and freedoms, but they hate our country. And they make it clear. I've interacted with these people at protests. They hate the United States. And yet here they are using our rights to basically attack us. And it's a very, very strange thing. And the dissidents are saying, when are Westerners going to wake up? That's
Wow.
the message I get from them all the time.
Dexter, this has been incredibly informative. As always, my brother, you are
Thank you.
such a wealth of information and you give it with such clarity. Dexter Van Zile, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.